Hello and welcome to the Football Hipsters Podcast. I am your host, Kris, once again, and we've got another preview show for you, you lucky boys and girls. We've just released, actually, just today, we've released the League One, or Ligue 1, whichever you prefer, preview, which myself and Rich Allen did recently. And we've also released the one that myself and Ross did for the English Football League. That was last week, so do check them out. But today, we're going German as we preview this season's Bundesliga. Now, we've got who better to have on this podcast than, firstly, I'll introduce our regular crewmate. It's Mr. Drew Thompson. Evening, Drew. How are you?
Good evening, Kris. Well, good to be back.
Indeed. Or afternoon for you, of course, where you are, but different time zones. And it's with great pleasure that we have a man who's based in Cologne, no less, and formerly of Talking Football and currently of Deutsche Welle. It is Mr. Ross Dunbar. Good afternoon to you, Ross.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure, Ross. We've been trying to get hold of someone of your esteemed quality and knowledge for quite a while, so we really appreciate your time today. So thank you very much. Right, we're going to jump straight in at the deep end then, gentlemen. We're going to run through, obviously, the last season's table and have a look at the teams that went up, have a look at the teams that came down, and obviously focus on what we think is going to happen for the next season. So, Ross, before all that, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, how you developed your love for German football, because I don't reckon that accent is German.
It could be. No, I mean, it was actually by accident, to be honest. I kind of went through a phase of watching a variety of European leagues. I even watched South American leagues, and it was kind of when the blogging scene was kind of kicking off about 5-6 years ago, I think. And I remember watching one game between Wolfsburg and Bayern Munich, and Wolfsburg won 5-1. I don't know if you remember the back heel goal from Graffiti. It was an absolute classic. And at that point, the Bundesliga was not on TV in the UK, and it was really watching it through a certain betting website that I won't give the pleasure of plugging.
I don't know what you mean.
yeah, and so it was kind of like a well-kept secret. And after that, I just kind of got hooked on it. And the year after that, obviously, Dortmund, were just starting under Jurgen Klopp, so it was kind of the perfect time to get hooked on it.
Fantastic. And are you a Dortmund follower yourself?
I wouldn't say I'm a fan, but certainly that was like the first kind of team that I grew close to.
Yeah. Drew's a big Dortmund fan, so that will rest well with him. And what took you to Cologne then? I'm assuming you were born in Scotland. So did you move there sort of out of choice, or was it to pursue the career?
Yeah. I mean, I'd been doing it for a couple of years. I'd been living, I would say, in the UK, and you can do a lot of things from the UK, but getting the experience of coming out here and getting in contact with the clubs and being part of the whole kind of German football scene was quite cool, and had the opportunity to come out before the World Cup, and obviously Germany won the World Cup, so that was ideal, and after that I've just stayed ever since, so quite fortunate that everything's kind of worked out.
Yeah, nice bonus. And just before we move into our preview, obviously you've been part of a few podcasts before, and some sad news that Talking Football is no longer carrying on. But you did quite a few podcasts with those guys last year. How was that to sort of chat to people that people might know, people like Archie Rintut, for example, and James Thorogood, the presenter? How did you find the whole podcasting experience?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, especially given that all the guys are based in Cologne as well, so you have maybe 6, 7, 8 English guys or UK or British guys here who, you can talk to them about the Bundesliga. I mean, it's still a pretty niche market, but I think there's certainly a real interest. Certainly in the UK, I think people are quite open and interested in the Bundesliga. So we always had good feedback. We always had really good shows. So it's a shame that it's not going to carry on. But yeah, when one thing goes, something else will start.
Absolutely, and stay tuned, people, because Ross is working on things. So stay tuned to our Twitter feed. We shall plug away when that happens. Right, let's jump into it then, chaps. Drew, I'm going to pass the reins over to you first of all, because I wanted to get maybe a stat or two from you, and we're going to mix it up a bit here. Let's start with Dortmund, the team you love the most. Obviously, they've had quite a busy summer, so I'll pass it across to you and have a little chat with Ross about what you think of their prospects for the next season.
Sure. I'll start off with a quote from Tuchel at the end of last season that says, "I'm not satisfied that Bayern are now 10 points away and the gap should not have been so big. I'm very worried about our ability to compete. We're a long way off and it's self-inflicted. It's a shame that this season finished after the 32nd game. We stopped playing to the limit. We must find our form and improve our attitude." I think it's funny that because, given how well Dortmund rebounded under him in his first season in a club, it's a step up from Mainz. You would say that, leading the league in goals scored with 82, two more than Bayern. You would see that, or you'd think that rather, that he's done quite well for his first season in charge. But when you read his words, you feel that he's disappointed. He truly, genuinely feels that the gap should have been closer, that Dortmund had a legitimate chance at actually winning the Bundesliga this last season. So, first I'll start off with you, Ross. What would you think about those comments? Would you say do you feel that he is justly disappointed? Do you think he might be reaching a step too high his first season with those comments, or do you feel that Dortmund are right on where they should have been given last season, and do you expect them to push on this coming season? We'll get on the transfer business later, but just those initial thoughts from you would be great.
Yeah, I can understand his point. I think there's almost a resignation in Germany that nobody is good enough to compete with Bayern Munich. And certainly when you see comments from Hans-Joachim Watzke, the chief executive, they tend to be quite negative. They tend to be almost kind of envious of the kind of money that Bayern Munich have, and it's understandable. It's quite interesting last season because Dortmund kind of lay behind for a long period, and then there was a point towards kind of March, April, when they really picked up form, and going into that game against Bayern Munich at home, they could have cut the gap down to 2 points. Now, if they had cut the gap to 2 points, you could have said there was a title race. That would have put a lot of pressure on Bayern to finish the job. And it's also quite disappointing that they went out to Liverpool, because I think the club placed a lot of emphasis on winning a European trophy. They would have been one of very few teams in European football to have won all the major European trophies, the Cup Winners' Cup, the Champions League, and the UEFA Cups, or Europa League, sorry. So, yeah, I think it's disappointing for Dortmund how the season ended, the fact that things came off the rails a little bit towards the end and they didn't get success in the Europa League. Like you touched on, before, it's been quite a weird summer for Dortmund. You could also just say it's a transitional season for them. Obviously they have a great coach, but unfortunately, I think it's difficult to maybe be optimistic this season for Dortmund, given the amount of players that they've lost. Obviously Gundogan, Hummels, and Mkhitaryan, huge players for them. So, I think replacing players of that quality is just going to be very difficult.
Let's just sorry, because I know you're precisely. I just want to stay with that for a minute. I've gotten into quite a few discussions with some Dortmund supporters over the summer, and just fans who are supporting of the Bundesliga in general, and we've tried to look at the business. And for me, I have some questions on a personal level. A lot of the players brought in, I like. I think Ousmane Dembele not only was a brilliant piece of business given how much money was spent, but I think despite his age, he can actually come in and still slot into a starting 11 role if he was tasked with that, and I think he'd still fare quite well. I thought Sebastian Rode was good business as well. Rafa Guerreiro, I know Kris can speak highly about Guerreiro all day, considering Kris he's a Lorient fan, and Guerreiro can come in at left back, also a young player, and still adapt to the league well and perform well under a Tuchel system. But my issue is I genuinely feel like I don't know if Hummels was really replaced well or not, and how do you feel about that?
It's difficult because I don't know if there are a lot of centre backs out there like Mats Hummels. He's very unique in the fact that he's a very aggressive defender in terms of playing a high line. He really likes to go out and challenge the ball. He doesn't sit back and try to defend his 18-yard box. He really tries to play man-to-man, and he does it, I think, pretty well. And certainly his use of the ball is is really exquisite at times. I mean, I don't think there are a lot of players that would have been able to replace him. I actually think Niklas Zula from Hoffenheim would have been a good shout to replace him. The fact that he's German is one thing, has experience in the Bundesliga, but I think his passing ability is of that standard. I must admit, I don't know a lot about Marc Bartra from Barcelona. I know that he's been around the squad for a while. He obviously is coming through the system where, playing from the back and build-up play is a big part of the Barcelona philosophy. So you would assume that he has, good build-up play, good passing. Defensively, though, might be a bit of a problem. I mean, although Germany has moved with the times in terms of tactics and styles, there are a lot of teams who will play one big striker and really try to rough it up. And I'm not too sure whether Bartra is going to be the kind of right guy to defend in those situations.
It's a tough one, isn't it, to know what business will come in and what will come good, and how those sort of systems or styles will change and how they'll adapt. So, yeah, I'm interested by the Bartra one, and I can confirm, yes, I'm a big Rafa Guerreiro fan. I'm not bitter at all that he didn't end up at the club I support. But moving on, let's go right to the other end of the table, Ross, and take the two promoted clubs as one. Your kind of thoughts on Red Bull Leipzig? I know a lot of people have got very mixed views on the side and how they're run, and also SC Freiburg, who of course have been up in the Bundesliga in fairly recent times. They're back. How do you see those two progressing, and is this potentially a very big season for both for very different reasons?
Yeah, I mean, cards on the table right away. I do not like the idea of Leipzig being in the Bundesliga. I don't like the idea of what they're trying to do. However, the German Football League, the organisation that governs the Bundesliga and the second division, they have allowed this to happen. This has been 5-6 years in the making. If they wanted to stop this, they could have. So I don't really think there's much point in complaining about it. I see a lot of talk about boycotts and stuff like that, but you know what? It's happened, and the clubs and the league have to take blame for what's happened. And there's a lot of dodgy deals, that's a bit unfair, but I mean, I think there are a lot of solid commercial partnerships and certainly ownership deals in German football nowadays. You have Wolfsburg with Volkswagen, Leverkusen with Bayer. You have, of course, Hoffenheim, who are owned by Dietmar Hopp. But you also have Bayern, who are absolutely bankrolled by these companies who are based in Bavaria. Schalke have a massive deal with Gazprom. I know it's not the same thing as Red Bull and RB Leipzig. I get that, but I mean, I think it's kind of splitting hairs, to be honest. From a football point of view, I think they'll be a great addition to the league because I think their management is excellent. Ralf Rangnick, I think, is a very perceptive guy. I think he knows what he's doing. I think he's got a strategy there in terms of bringing through young players, and they've invested a lot of their money into a youth academy. They've spent about 40 million euros on a brand new training centre. So that's going to be interesting to see if we see the results of that in a few years' time. But this is a club that has big ambitions. I mean, they're already talking about moving to a new stadium of 60,000-70,000. They're going to be a massive, I think, player in the Bundesliga for years to come. Leipzig has a metropolitan population of about 1 million, and there's really no clubs in that area at all that have Bundesliga football. So they've cornered the market of young people and families and people who just want to go and watch football. And they're going to have fans. People complain about Wolfsburg and Hoffenheim, but Leipzig will have, fans and passion in their stadium. They're going to have 40,000, home fans every game. So I think from a sporting perspective, I think that's a good addition to the league. Freiburg is completely different, of course, because their ambitions are a little bit more modest, and certainly in my years watching the Bundesliga, they've always been fascinating to keep an eye on, because I remember at one point they were bottom of the league and they basically sacked their manager at the winter break. They brought in Christian Streich from the under-19s, and they sold their best player, Papa Demba Cisse, who went to Newcastle United for about 10 million quid at the time. And they basically promoted a bunch of young players who no one had ever heard of, and they managed to stay up. I mean, it's quite remarkable that they do that. Obviously, the strategy was to adapt if they got relegated, to having all these young guys coming in and playing Bundesliga football, but they actually stayed up. So this is a club that's really well run. I would definitely encourage anyone who is coming to Germany for a game to go to Freiburg. It's really something quite special, great part of the world. I think it's going to be very difficult for them, to be honest, but Christian Streich will bring a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm, and I think we'll try to play positive football, and hopefully that kind of gets the rewards.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be interested to see how they get on, and having come back up, see how they progress this season. Let's go do a U-turn, come right back up to the top of the table, and Drew, I'm going to pass back over to you because I want to talk a little bit about Schalke as an individual club now. Lots of business, Drew. What do you make of their kind of regeneration? I believe you've got a couple of things you want to pass on to Ross stats-wise there as well.
I mean, I actually, and I'll have you to excuse the background noise. Now they're doing construction work on the outside of my apartment building today, so I apologize, everybody. But for me, I think the business it kind of almost mirrors the fact that Marcus Weinzier's come in as new manager. He'll want a little bit of a different approach than what they had under Brighton Idol maybe last season. So you could highlight the fact that Brillenbolo's come in. Abdurrahman Baba has come in. Koch has come in from Sevilla. I know Tom was pleased about that, and he brought in Naldo as well. The average age of their rivals between the transfer business and the fact that they promoted 4 players from under 19s and the reserves, so the average age of the rivals are 21.8 years old. So it seems like they're going to try to really rely on the youth pipeline and also youthful additions, and that sort of speaks to the fact that that's kind of how Schalke like to operate. And when you add the fact that the likes of Max Meyer and Leon Goretzka is still quite young, Johannes Geist is still quite young. So for me, my question for you, Ross, would be: do you think that Weinziel can get them to be improved in his first season, or do you think it's going to be sort of, maybe stabilize, aim for Europa League in his first season and then push on the next season? Or do you think he'll have ambitions of trying to get that Champions League spot, maybe wrestle away from Gladbach or maybe Leverkusen, depending on how the boys play under him, maybe even early doors? What do you think?
I think a lot will depend on maybe what business they can do until the end of the transfer window. Of course, losing Sané is a massive blow, but it gives them an extra 50 million, 60 million euros to play with. I'm sure that they will try to add more quality and attack. But yeah, I totally agree with what you just said there about Schalke, using the youth pipeline that they have. I mean, this is something that's really part of the club culture in Schalke. They really pride themselves on the fact that they bring through so many great young players, and I think internationally maybe they don't get the credit they deserve for it. And it's interesting because Weinziel and Christian Heidel were probably 2 of the best guys in their respective positions in the last few years in the Bundesliga. Weinziel, of course, doing so well at Augsburg, getting them into the Europa League for the first time, and Heidel basically building Mainz up from scratch. I mean, this was a guy who was the sporting director at Mainz on a part-time basis up until about 2005 when they got their first promotion. So, I mean, we're talking about 2 guys who are, very clued up in what they want to do, and interesting to see how things change. I mean, Schalke generally have been quite reckless in the transfer market the last few years. Heidel certainly isn't going to do that. And so far, I think you can see, the effects of good scouting. Mbolo coming in, Baba, like you say. I don't know. I think it might be a step too far to expect them to be in the Champions League. Interesting that Elf Freunde, the German magazine about kind of football culture, they tipped them to be second, which is, I think, maybe a little bit of a stretch.
I think it's a very large stretch, personally. But I would agree. I think that if they finished around right about where they finished last season, I think that's what you could expect. But I think people need to look for a bit of improvement. Augsburg's defensive record under Weinziel the last 2 seasons was almost identical as Schalke's, with less depth and less quality at the back as well. And for me, I feel like now that he's going to be coming with a side who has better quality in all areas of the pitch, and a side that he can really mold using better resources, I think, even though if Schalke doesn't finish above 5th, I think if you just see just improvement from him, especially at the back, because I think for me their biggest weakness was the fact that they leaked too many goals too often. If they improve just in that area, then I think they're going to be okay. But it'll be something that some of our listeners and fans of business should probably look out for next season. But I don't know, they could be exciting for me.
Yeah, it's definitely a team to watch, and again, one of those teams that everyone sort of looks at and goes, "Okay, they're a name I recognise." Sounds awful to say it, but it's true. Let's take another pair together now, Russ. I want to ask you a little bit about Leverkusen and Mönchengladbach. We have a Gladbach fan in our midst, John, one of our other panelists. He's quite a big Gladbach fan, and obviously the most notable absentee from their squad this season is Granit Xhaka, and of course Havard Nordtveit, who's also moved on, which has gone a bit under the radar more, and Leverkusen. They are just Leverkusen, I suppose, aren't they? They're sort of a team that, again, will be looking to push on this season, but a little bit of movement from them, both in and out. In fact, quite a lot of movement in and out from them. Who do you think of the two is likely to have the better season, and who are you most excited by to see the changes that have been made over the summer?
I'm quite excited to see how Leverkusen perform this season, to be honest. They're a club that they don't get a lot of press internationally. Obviously it's a club that's run by Bayern. They don't really have the most passionate fan base in terms of, history and tradition, but this is a club that's really well run. Jonas Bold, the sports manager, and Rudi Voller, the sporting director, have been fantastic in the transfer market. They have a really good scouting network, and you can see that with the players that they've brought in. And of course, Roger Schmidt, the coach, is tactically very interesting, probably one of the most tactically interesting coaches in Europe. Unfortunately, the last 2 or 3 seasons, I think depth has been a big problem. They have a good set of maybe 13, 14 players, and when they get into the crunch time of the season, they just seem to implode with injuries and niggles here and there. But this year they've added a little bit of depth. I'm quite curious to see how that kind of pans out. And certainly some of the younger players who were involved with the under-19s last season in the UEFA Youth League have come into the first team as well. So I'm quite interested. I mean, I must admit, I would probably tip Leverkusen as my second horse in Germany this season. I think they might just pit Dortmund to second place. With Mönchengladbach, yeah, you touched on Xhaka, and I think certainly the leadership vacuum will be interesting to see if they can fill that. Lars Stindl is the captain this year. He's attacking midfield player who's got experience from being at Hanover, but I mean he's not really got huge experience of international football and European competition. So interesting to see how that works out. Schubert is an interesting coach as well. I think you might see Gladbach play 3-4-3 quite a lot this season. Vestergaard has come in for Werder Bremen. He's a very good player. And Christoph Kramer, the former Leverkusen player, has gone back there. Cost about 15 million euros. So yeah, I think Gladbach will be very strong contenders for 3rd and 4th place. But again, obviously they have potentially Champions League football that might be a distraction because I don't think they have a huge amount of depth in their squad.
It's always interesting to see how sort of sides like Leverkusen will get on. It's interesting that you think they can finish second. That's a good shout. So we shall be keeping a close eye on that one. Drew, I'm gonna throw you a grenade to throw on to Ross
you
now.
You always do.
Every time. I know. I'm simply going to say the word Wolfsburg to you, and I'm going to hand it straight back over to you because I'm sure you've got plenty to ask Ross on this one.
Well, honestly, I always stuttered when I talked about Wolfsburg last season because I never really know what direction really taken it. But personally, I want to look at the business that they did in the summer, and for me, I think that might highlight how they'll do this season. Max Kruse now went to Werder Bremen. Schürrle went over to Dortmund. They lost an experienced center back in Naldo. He went to Schalke. Felipe left to the Portuguese league. So those are interesting departures, but players coming in. Yannick Gerhardt, I think, is not well. He doesn't get a lot of press, as you would say, as a center midfielder, but I think it's actually a really solid center midfield addition. Jeffrey Bruma coming over from PSV Eindhoven, I think is actually a very, very good center back addition. Josip Carlo, up and coming left winger from Dinamo Zagreb, that's a good bit of business. Blaszczykowski, as I just said before, came over from Dortmund, and also a move that didn't get any press at all was Didavi coming from Stuttgart, and a lot of people had a lot of praise for him last season in Stuttgart. He was one of the more consistent performances they had, maybe the most consistent performer they had in an attacking sense. So when you add those components, especially maybe the Didavi component and Gerhardt and Bruma, I wonder if they really did a good job targeting their issues. For me, not only were they really consistent last season, but somehow they really still struggled to score goals. So even though Max Kruse left, you have goal-scoring players from the midfield like the Davi, like Draxler, whether he stays or not is another matter. But with those additions, Ross, do you think Wolfsburg can improve, or do you think they'll struggle?
It's a good question. I must admit, I really, really don't know. I mean, I think, yeah, the signings you highlight probably do address certain areas of the team, but I think they have lacked a quality striker for a while. I know that Bas Dost has had a great scoring record at times, but I think when it comes to the crunch, he's not a guy who you can rely on at the top level. I don't think he works well enough with other players. I don't think he complements that, and sometimes, you know, when Max Kruse played up there, you noticed a massive improvement. Certainly in the Champions League last season, Wolfsburg were great in possession, and I think a large part of that was down to the role that Kruse played. It'd be a huge loss this year for Wolfsburg, I think. He's a really talented player. I think also the Draxler issue is something that's hanging over them. I mean, they had this with Kevin De Bruyne last year, and I think Kevin De Bruyne, this saga around him kind of really dragged out for a long time. They dropped a few points at the start of the season, and it kind of cast a little bit of a shadow on their preparations, and I wonder if that's the same kind of situation as Draxler now. I mean, Draxler has made it pretty clear that he wants to leave. He feels as if he's being treated quite poorly by Wolfsburg, and you wonder, even if he does stay, even if let's just say he does stay, I wonder if his heart is really going to be in it. It's a difficult one to say. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Dieter Hecking. I think he's a good coach, stable coach, did well at Nuremberg, but he's not a guy who's going to get you into, you know, the Champions League regularly, in my opinion. And yeah, I think given the competition that they have for places in the Champions League and for the Europa League, I think they might be kind of 7th or 8th next season.
With all that money as well. Put your head on the block, Ross. Do you see Draxler staying or going as we stand right now on August the 9th?
I think he'll go.
I think you might be right.
Yeah.
Doom awaits if that happens. But another team that I want to focus on individually, Ross, is Werder Bremen. Another side that if you were to speak to an alien about German football, they are surely one of the teams that you would say, well, tradition, a sort of a club that people would know. They've had some famous players down the years, and a club that you wouldn't expect to have struggled quite as badly as they did last season, or maybe you would. What do you make of what they've tried to do in the off-season, and do you sort of anticipate more of struggles ahead, or can they actually sort of turn around and push up the table this season?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, I hate putting my head on the block, like you just said there, with teams like Werder Bremen. I mean, they have obviously lost players like Vestergaard, who's gone to Mönchengladbach, and Pape Djilobodji has gone back to Chelsea. So they've lost their two centre-halves. I think that's one issue. But they have also signed a couple of players to replace them. Lamine Zané has come in from Bordeaux. Fallo Diagne, I think he's coming from Rennes, possibly, and
yes.
Moisander has come in from Sampdoria. So these are three guys who are playing in Europe's top leagues. So I'm very curious to see how they settle into the Bundesliga. I mean, that could either be a masterstroke or it could be a disaster. I think that the new sporting director, Frank Baumann, who was the captain when they won the league in 2004, I think he's a guy who's really clued up, and I think, coming certainly from my contacts with his agent especially, he's a guy who has spent a lot of time in different European countries. Maybe that's why they've signed guys from Italy and from France, and of course they've brought in Max Kruse from Wolfsburg, the fourth most expensive player in Werder Bremen's history, which is quite a big statement for a team that, looking at Elf Freunde's predictions, which are generally quite reliable, they've been tipped at second bottom. Now, I think certainly after the Kruse transfer, you have to probably reassess that, because Kruse is an exceptional player. He's a Champions League standard player, in my opinion, and I was actually very surprised that even a team like Dortmund wouldn't have gone for him. I mean, I think he would add a lot to the squad, and I think even from a leadership perspective, a guy like that, I think he would rub off well on players who maybe aren't as kind of vocal and more experienced. I mean, Werder Bremen have a lot of young players, a lot of guys who maybe don't want to take the responsibility when the chips are down, and that's why guys like Pizarro and Max Kruse could be really important. I mean, if also Aron Johansson, the American centre forward, can get fit again. If he can get fit and he plays alongside maybe Max Kruse or Pizarro, that's a team that could do quite well. I mean, I think they could be a little bit of a dark horse, maybe kind of top half potentially.
Yeah, it's a tough one to call, isn't it? It sort of seems like that. You just never know what you're going to get. Let's come over to Drew actually quickly before we move on from Bremen, because you've got something you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it from the standpoint of last season, Bremen scored the most goals outside of the top 5 in the league, including Mainz, Wolfsburg, Hertha. They scored the same amount of goals actually as Stuttgart did. So my question, or twofold. One, I don't know if their business from a defensive aspect was good enough. As you said, losing Vestergaard is a huge loss, but I don't really know if the likes of Moisander are. He brings experience, sure, but the quality, I think, is quite a few steps below Vestergaard. Kris can speak more about Luminisane and Falodini probably more than I can, because obviously Kris, watches a fair bit of French football. So I'm not quite sure if that's enough, but I think the move for Kruse was interesting because being 28 now, not quite sure how long his career is going to end, but they just promoted Johannes Eggestein from the under-19s. Kind of a similar player. He's 18, so he can learn from Max Kruse. I think that's one deal that people should highlight because from a long-term standpoint, if Bremen want to continue the fact that they are good in the final third or better than most, that's one deal that might pay dividends moving forward. But I still think the defensive question wasn't really answered. I think that's really where they struggled last season. They just leaked far too many goals, and I certainly think they had the second worst defensive record in the Bundesliga last season. So I'm not quite sure I don't know if they'll get relegated, but I still think they might struggle, but I'm not quite sure what either of you would have to say on that.
Ross, go for gold. I'm a big fan of Sane, I'll say that much, but your thoughts on the defensive side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think they went. I think did they go the whole season without losing a clean sheet, or maybe they managed to keep one in the last few games, but it was almost the whole season, I think, and yeah, I agree. I'm really not sure what to expect defensively. Like you said, I mean, I think Moisander is a good defender, but I don't think he's as good as Vestergaard. So yeah, I could totally agree with that. But I personally believe that defending is a collective thing. I don't think you can just throw a great player in there and all of a sudden it makes things better. I think it's all about the collective situation. I mean, Bremen, for example, traditionally throw their fullbacks forward. They throw everyone into the box. So I think it's about finding a little bit more of a balance. Also having, signing 3 centre-halves from Italy and France, it gives them a little bit more depth as well to play with. I don't know enough about Diani or Sané, but I'm curious to see how it pans out. To be honest, I'm not too sure. They've also signed Jaroslav Drobny from Hamburg, who might be their number 1 next season. Felix Wiedwald is a little bit shaky at times, maybe not the most dominating presence. Drobny, I'm a little bit unconvinced by, but he is massively experienced in the Bundesliga, so that might be a solution to that problem.
Yeah, we shall see. Let's group another couple of clubs together for our next discussion. Let's group together Darmstadt and Augsburg. Oh, Augsburg, I should say. I always say Aug. I don't know why. So Darmstadt and Augsburg, 2 sort of less fashionable clubs, I think it's fair to say. Certainly one extreme to the other. Darmstadt very heavily defensive. Augsburg at least sort of trying to play out a little bit more attractive football. What sort of seasons do you expect for these two, Ross, into 16-17?
To be honest, it wouldn't surprise me if both of them got relegated this season. I'm definitely not putting my head in the block for that one. But Darmstadt obviously have lost Dirk Schuster, who's gone to Augsburg, and Augsburg have lost Marcus Weinziel. So 2 coaching changes, which could alter the dynamics for both of those clubs. I'm not a big fan of Norbert Meyer, who has replaced Schuster at Darmstadt. Darmstadt have also lost Sandro Wagner, who has gone to Hoffenheim, and I think could have a really good season there. He's a really good player. They've also lost Konstantin Rausch, who was basically their kind of like second most attacking player in that side. So replacing both of those players is going to be a bit of a difficulty. I mean, they've already made some moves in the transfer market. They've signed a Ukrainian striker whose name completely slips my mind right now, but I'm not sure he is certainly historically has been as prolific as Sandro Wagner has been at other clubs. I think they could have a difficult season, Darmstadt. And to be honest, I mean, it's not really an embarrassment for them to get relegated, because even in the second division in German football, they're not a leading club. I mean, even if they can stabilise in the second division, I think that will be a positive for them. With Augsburg, they have reaffirmed kind of that they are trying to be quite modest in their resources. You know, they've managed to get Finn Bogason on a permanent contract, which is a really good move. I know that they're looking for a centre back and a striker to supplement that. They've signed Takashi Usami from Gamba Osaka. He was formerly of Bayern Munich and Hoffenheim a few years ago. So, interesting to see how those players develop. I mean, I wouldn't really put Usami down as a Dirk Schuster type player. I mean, Dirk Schuster, for listeners who maybe don't know, I mean, he is very traditionally East German in terms of his mindset. It's all about working hard. I mean, his famous quote was mentality beats quality. And Takashi Usami is a player you could probably describe as being a luxury player. You know, lots of nice touches, but maybe could maybe deceive at some point. So I think both teams will struggle. If they can survive, I think you'd have to say that's a successful season for both sides.
Yeah, agreed there. That name, I'm wondering if it's this gentleman, Dennis Oljunik. I think that's seems to be the guy.
They signed the guy. It's Artem Milevsky, I think, or someone like that. From Dnipro or from a Ukrainian side, I must admit his name slips my mind.
Fedetsky, the right back.
Fedetsky, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Interesting. So another new name to look out for, maybe, or not, as the case may be. Drew, I'm going to give you two more to fire across to Ross. I want to sort of touch on Hoffenheim and Ingolstadt. Again, sort of two less fashionable names. One half of the Plastico derby, of course, Hoffenheim. What would you like to ping across to us for these two?
I mean, Hoffenheim sort of became like a pod favorite last season, with Nagelsmann coming in and sort of doing his best job to keep them up. I kind of want to highlight, I guess, much like the others, what we've talked about so far. What do you expect from them? I know this. The business they've done, I thought was quite solid this summer. Kramar's come in on the full. They picked up Lucas Rupp from Stuttgart. As you said before, Sancho Wagner has come in, and we spoke highly about Sancho Wagner a lot last season for his body work at Darmstadt and the fact that he's probably one of the more underrated center forwards in the Bundesliga. They also brought in Benjamin Ubner from Ingolstadt, and he had quite a good season there. So do you feel that Nagelsmann has done enough in the market to sort of build on what he tried to stabilize last season, and can they push on? They struggled to score goals last season, and now with Kevin Volland gone, do you think that Wagner can help there? Do you think they'll improve in the final third? Do you think they'll improve defensively, or do you think that it might be a bridge too far for them to avoid the drop this season? What's your honest opinion on them?
Yeah, I mean, I would subscribe to the fact that the Hoffenheim are a very interesting team. I'm a big fan of Julian Nagelsmann. I had the pleasure of spending a bit of time in his company when he was the assistant coach a few years ago. It's amazing to think that he's only 28, but he was actually the assistant coach 2 or 3 years ago and kept Hoffenheim in the league. So, I mean, this is a guy who's already got experience of Bundesliga football, and he made a really big impact last season. He changed the style of play a little bit, more focus on short passing, possession. They play 4-3-3 generally. I think it would be a bit of a loss if Eduardo Vargas left the club. He brings a lot of quality, I think, in the final third in terms of movement, positional play. With Volland, to be honest, I think they could cope without Kevin Volland. Volland wasn't really that impressive last year for me, and I think one thing about Hoffenheim is that they have a lot of young players coming through who could make a bit of an impact. Nadia Mamiri played on the left-hand side of the 4-3-3 last season, did really, really well. Philip Ochs is a young German player to keep an eye on. He's been part of the squad under Nagelsmann. I think last week he received a pretty prestigious award in German football for his talent, so he's a guy to keep an eye on as well. I think they could finish top half next season. I think they're a side that is going places. They'll play with a structure and a plan, and the signings that you named there, Lucas Rupp, for example, who was at Stuttgart last season, I think was really impressive, was very unlucky to be part of a relegated side. He's also going back to the team where he started his career as well. So I think they could do quite well next season. I would be tipping them to be in the top half. As for Ingolstadt, I mean, I think, again, it's a bit like Darmstadt and Augsburg. They have obviously punched above their weight to get to where they are now, and they've had a coaching change with Hasenhüttl going to Leipzig. They've brought in Markus Kauczynski from Karlsruhe. He's done a very good job there, actually. He had them stabilised as being one of the biggest teams in the second division. But this was a team that Hasenhüttl really formed as a strong defensive unit. It was all about the collective. It was all about, kind of the structure and all about, being compact. And I'm not too sure whether the new coach is going to be able to replicate that identically. I think he might have to change and put his own ideas in. So it could be a tough one for Ingolstadt as well this season.
I'm going to really, really test you now because I'm going to throw three teams at you in one go. Eintracht Frankfurt, who narrowly escaped the drop last season, literally narrowly. They really were right up against it to the very end day. In fact, came through the playoff. And I'm going to lump them in with Hamburg, another perennial underachiever. And Hertha Berlin, who probably overachieved, well, definitely overachieved last season. I appreciate that's quite a lump to throw them all in and three completely different sides, but what's your thoughts and any sort of key things to pick out from any of those three ahead of the new season?
I mean, so with Hertha, obviously, they have already gone out of European competition. They lost to Brøndby over 2 legs, so that's a massive disappointment for them because they had put so much effort into getting into Europe in the first place, and European football would have meant so much to Berlin because Berlin hasn't really had a football club that kind of matches the prestige of the city, and to be in the Europa League group stages would have been a big success for them. You touched on last year, obviously, they were kind of the overachievers. They had an absolutely fantastic first half of the season. I think it was the second best first half of the season in the club's history in the Bundesliga. And then it kind of regressed to the mean a little bit in the second half of the season. They had a spell where they couldn't pick up a win for anyone's business. And I must admit, I think they would probably be another team that would fit in and around mid-table. They've not made a lot of signings this summer. Ondrej Duda, from who played for Slovakia during the European Championships, has gone to Hertha. Interesting to see how he settles in. I would definitely, again, point out Mitchell Weiser, who was great last year at right back for Hertha. I think he could have a really good season for them again this year, potentially earning him a move to a bigger club. With Hamburg, Hamburg in Germany are like a massive deal. I mean, they are an institution, obviously former European champions, but in the last few years they've really struggled. I mean, they contested 2 of the last 3 relegation playoffs, so they've been very close to relegation. It would have been their first relegation in the club's history, and they're the only team never to be relegated from the Bundesliga, so it's a really big part of their identity. This year, they've been very interesting in the transfer market. They've brought in Filip Kostic from Stuttgart. He's a player I rate very, very highly. I think he could have gone as well to a Champions League side. He's the most expensive player in Hamburg's history, so it's a huge statement of intent for a club like that to spend so much money in a season. Just after obviously having been so close to the bottom, they've brought in Halilovic from Barcelona on loan. I'm not really too sure what to expect of him, but it gives them some attacking quality. And Bruno Labbadia generally is a coach who sorts out defensively. He sorts out the teams defensively. He can, put a good solid structure in place. He did that in the last few years. And Kostic and Halilovic especially will add something different to their attacking play. And the third team, sorry, I've completely forgot the third team.
Eintracht Frankfurt.
Eintracht Frankfurt, sorry, yeah. Like you said, I mean, they were so close to relegation last year. A huge club in Germany again. They average 50,000 every week, and they brought in Niko Kovac as their coach towards the end of last season, former Croatian international. I'm not too sure what to think of him. I mean, he's tactically maybe not the greatest coach, but he certainly motivates the players. He certainly got a reaction out of his team towards the end of last season, and Freddie Bobic is the new sporting director at Frankfurt and has already made some interesting moves. I mean, they're a very unpredictable team, Frankfurt, actually, because they've brought in guys, for example, from Real Madrid's B team, and I'm not really too familiar with these guys, and I don't think many people are. So they could go either way, to be honest. They could be, what Cologne were last season, kind of solid mid-table side, or they maybe aren't able to put those structures in place, and maybe they find themselves in a relegation battle.
Yeah, tough one. I like Hagota. I think it's a decent pickup from Gladbach. But and Drew will tell you, I have a massive man crush on Alexander Meyer. But
he does. It's gross.
Less said the better. It must be the hair. Must be. Budget Zlatan, as we call him on this show. Anyway, moving on. There's a couple left. Drew, I want to give you Mainz next because I know they're a team that you've kept a very close eye on for whatever reason, kind of a hipster reason, I suppose.
Last season, yeah.
Absolutely. So, what would you like to ask Ross on Mainz?
Well, I think it's simple. They lost two key components from last season. Kris goes to Liverpool in a move that I personally question, and then Baumgartlinger, who I think is one of the least talked about yet most effective defensive midfielders in all of Europe. He goes to Bayer Leverkusen, and I think he instantly improves that team. So how do you think they get on just by those two losses? And additionally, do you feel that, I don't know, I think at times last season they showed their inexperience. They had that really bad patch of form in the last 5-6 weeks last season, only picking up 3 points once, 3 draws, 2 losses, and I think that's why they missed out on a storied run on getting that fourth Champions League spot, maybe even finishing fifth above Schalke, who also struggled in the final week. So the fact that maybe now they have a bit more experience for their players, more expectations as well, perhaps. Do you think that given the two key losses, they didn't bring in a ton of quality? They did bring in Jean-Philippe, I don't know how to pronounce it, Gammon from Lens. Kris can tell me, the center back, and then John Cordoba. They brought in on a full from Granada. Do you think those two deals will maybe offset the fact that losses of Baumgartlinger and Kris can be borderline catastrophic depending on how they settle? And do you think that the experience showed last season, do you think that could be an issue as well, or do you think they can kick on from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with Mainz is that they have punched above their weight at times, and generally, I've been guilty as well of writing them off at times. But Martin Schmidt is, I think for me, he's one of the best coaches in the league. I think tactically he's very impressive. If you have the opportunity to read some of the German press, he comes up with really quirky ideas of team building. I mean, in January last year, he basically sent his team halfway up the Alps with nothing but the basic essentials, which is quite an odd way of team building. I mean, I think some of the players who are used to being pampered would have been a little bit shocked by that, but it certainly worked. They're having they had an outstanding season regardless of the slip towards the end of the season. I think really the interesting thing is that they've still managed to keep hold of Yunus Mali. He was a guy who was obviously linked with Dortmund in January, and I was very surprised that Dortmund didn't pursue that interest a little bit further. And we've not really seen any clubs step up to the mark and buy him. I mean, I think he's definitely courting a transfer. It wouldn't surprise me if he went to Turkey, maybe Fenerbahce, Galatasaray type transfer. But he's a good player, and if Mainz still have him, I mean, that's a huge positive there. Yoshinori Moto, of course, had a great season last year in his first season in Germany. He was being linked with Manchester United before his injury, and obviously now at the start of the season, he'll be there, and it gives Martin Schmidt options that he's got Cordoba and Muto healthy for the start of the new season. I would definitely want to flag up Jairo Sampero, the Spanish wide player, who did really well, I think, last season. Certainly in a lot of the big games when Mainz were towards 4th and 5th place, he was excellent, I thought. Contributed with some big goals, technically very good. He came from Sevilla, I think, last season or last transfer window. And I think he's a player you'd really to keep an eye on. I think if Mainz are going to have a good season, I think he could be really important for them.
It's an interesting team, isn't it, to follow, because they are kind of the outside hipster team, absolutely. And I know Drew was across them very much last season, so we'll see how they get on. Wouldn't be fair on you, Ross, as our guest of honour, to not give you some time to speak about the club in which, the place in which you live. So let's go on to FC Köln or Cologne, whichever you prefer. What's it been like over the summer there, sort of being in and around it and watching the comings and goings? Are the fans around you quite optimistic? Is there a bit of pessimism in the air? What's the general feeling?
I think it could be a little bit of both. I mean, again, like a lot of clubs in Germany, huge club. I mean, storied club. They've had a great history, from the European Cup and stuff like that. And certainly in this part of Germany, they command so much media attention. it's obviously difficult to know that from an international perspective, but they do command so much interest here, and they sell out their stadium most weeks. Unfortunately, though, for those fans who do go, they are one of the most boring teams in the league. They are very stable with Peter Stöger. He's managed to obviously bring them up and get them mid-table again. However, I think you have to ask when Cologne make that next step. This is a club that, I think in terms of their ambition would want to be regulars in European competition. I think they would want to be competing for a Europa League place. I'm not sure Stöger is the guy who could do that. I think maybe they have to look for somebody who could get a little bit more out of the team. They have very limited resources, of course, in terms of, buying players for big transfer fees. They've also managed to keep Anthony Modesta, who was a top goal scorer last season. They've managed to give him a new contract, which is a huge plus point. But I don't know. I'm certainly not saying they're going to be struggling, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Stöger effect rubbed off at some point, and maybe they would be bottom half of the table, which certainly wouldn't live up to the club's expectations, I don't think.
Anthony Modeste, the figure of fun in France when he was at Bordeaux, but he certainly kicked on in Germany. Sometimes players just work at certain leagues or certain teams, so fair play to him. He has definitely kicked on. That does, of course, leave but one. You might have noticed we've left them out, and that one, of course, is Bayern Munich. And Drew, I'm sure you've got plenty of things you could ask Ross on Bayern. New coach, Carlo Ancelotti, lots of new players, including our former Hipsters choice, Renato Sanchez. We found him before all of you lot, trust me. But what do you make, Drew, of Bayern Munich? And again, what would you like to ask Ross on their upcoming season?
Well, in regards to them, I feel like, I don't know, Ancelotti said he's not going to come in and it's not going to change much. There's no reason to come in and sort of try to reroute a system that's already working and it's already so dominant in the leagues. I thought the business was very good. Getting Mats Hummels and Jerome Boateng to play together week in, week out, not only is brilliant for Bayern, but it's also brilliant for the national team. So that business I thought was some of the best that you would see around your period. Renato Sanchez, I don't know. I've as a player, I think he impressed at the Euros. Obviously, given he's only 18, he has a lot of time in the world to develop. But Bayern have so many other young players. They've just also brought through Fabian Benko from Bayern too. They also brought in Niklas Dorsch. So those other two central players plus Renato Sanchez. So they have three new central midfielders who are 18 years old coming into the first team. So there's going to be a lot of competition for places, and you just wonder if, in regards to Sanchez, being in and around the first team and training with them, will that be enough, or is he the kind of player who needs to keep playing to develop, or will he just develop over time because he has natural ability? So that'll be the question mark for me. Other than that, you have to say that they're the favorites coming into the season. It's tough to see, back to front, who can really generally compete over the course of the year. They have the best depth in the league. From a talent perspective, they have the most ability. And even though they lost Pep, Ancelotti is vastly experienced at the very highest level. So, again, people have almost consigned to the fact that they're just going to go ahead and win again. But my question for Ross is, do you think there's some possible way at all that you can see Bayern slipping in some sort of different universe?
I think it's certainly possible. The Bundesliga is so competitive that I think there's a perception that Bayern Munich, turn up every week and they stroll it without having to put a lot of effort. And I think actually that's maybe a little bit unfair on the other clubs because they really do make it difficult for them. Defensively, they will really go there and try to shut up shop. And the one thing about Pep Guardiola is he is just relentless. If you ask anyone at Bayern Munich, they will tell you that Pep Guardiola is probably the best coach they've ever had. This guy is just an absolute phenomenon, and I think he got a very, very hard time in Germany. And to be honest, as much as I think Ancelotti is very experienced and has got a great CV in terms of the European Cups, I think they'll certainly not be as good as they were under Guardiola, in my opinion. I think Guardiola had the almost the proactiveness to really tinker all the time. Tactically, he kind of created new ideas and he really expanded the knowledge of the players. And of course, that will still be there. The players will still have that knowledge. They'll still be able to adapt to different situations. But I don't think Ancelotti will revolutionise things. I don't think his training will be as intense as Guardiola's. Perhaps that will be a benefit. I mean, who knows? I mean, that could actually be the benefit for Bayern Munich. I think Ancelotti will focus on the atmosphere around the club, the morale of the players, the conditioning of the players, that sort of thing. So I think, they're certainly favourites, but I don't think it's impossible for someone to compete with Bayern. I mean, if you look at someone like Thomas Müller, as much as internationally he has a great reputation, I thought for the last 6 months, and certainly through the European Championships, he was extremely poor, really, really poor. I mean, Thomas Müller is one of those players that if he's not scoring goals and contributing to attacking play, then he's practically useless. You know, he's one of those players that you really need to get the most of. And if he doesn't perform this year, then it will certainly make Bayern's attack a little bit easier to deal with. Obviously, with Robben and Ribéry, there's question marks over fitness there. Coman is kind of one of the key players. I'm really interested to see how David Alaba settles under Ancelotti. Ancelotti traditionally has tinkered a little bit with his midfield. We see Angel Di Maria, who played central midfield at Real Madrid. I think John Obi Mikel had a really good time with him at Chelsea. So potentially David Alaba could settle into a midfield position, and I'm really interested to see if that is the best for his qualities, because he wasn't great with the Austrian national team at the European Championships. It's quite hard when you play, obviously, with the Austrian national team, but whether he can maximise those qualities at Bayern Munich, I'm not too sure. But a very interesting season nonetheless, I think, because this is obviously a big transitional year for Bayern Munich in terms of the style of football. I don't know if Ancelotti will be able to maintain the same quality that Guardiola managed to over his 3 years.
Yeah, good shout. I just want to ask you a quick sub-question before we take a couple of listener questions here. Drew kind of touched on the youngsters there. Obviously, everyone knows about Kingsley Coman. It's obviously well sort of developed, but there's a couple that impressed me pre-season watching the international champions Flimmel, whatever that competition was. I'm still not quite sure how it works.
The ICC, you mean?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I thought that was a cricket tournament, but still. Benko, obviously, Drew mentioned, and Dorsch, but one that sort of is catching my attention is the Turkish lad, whose name completely escapes me, Ozturk, Dan Ozturk, yeah. And also another one that I'm sure Drew will be familiar with, Julian Green, who again stood out really well in pre-season. Is this maybe the season where we see the likes of 33-year-old Frank Ribéry and 32-year-old Arjen Robben? Do we see those sort of players start to go to the back of the queue and some of these youngsters start to make a name for themselves this season, do you think?
It's hard to say. I mean, with Julian Green, you don't really know what to expect. I mean, I've spoken a few times on American shows and people have asked me, you know, are people excited about Julian Green? But I mean, it's pre-season, it's a tour in the States. I mean, sorry to be a cynic, but I think there's a long way for him to go to be a Bayern player. I mean, he only made 5 substitute appearances at Hamburg. So, sorry, no, the 5 they didn't play. I don't think he played at all at Hamburg, to be honest. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not too sure whether Julian Green can make a big impact in this Bayern squad. Benko, yeah, I think he's got some talent. A little bit lightweight. But that's natural, he's still a teenager, so that's fair enough. I saw Ozturk against Manchester City. It was very impressive. But it's difficult to judge players on pre-season friendlies compared to Bundesliga. I think in terms of young players, I think probably the one we should keep an eye on is Joshua Kimmich. I mean, he did really well at the European Championships as a right-back. Good on the ball technically. Kind of in the same mould as Philipp Lahm in terms of his game intelligence, his versatility. You wonder maybe if Kimmich will play in central midfield or in right back. I saw the game against Man City, like I said, and Lam played right of a 3-man midfield. I wonder if that'll be the case this year, maybe in the Bundesliga. I'm not too sure. But Kimmich is certainly a guy to keep an eye on. I think he's got a lot of potential for this Bayern team.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how they develop. But we should be, of course, across that on the pod each week. And who knows if Bayern can be stopped? Certainly I don't. We've got a couple of lists of questions for you, Ross. So I will give you a couple, and I'm sure Drew can pull out a couple as well. So the first one comes in here from... Oh, he scrolls frantically down. Let's give you our very own Kat's question. She's
going to be mad. She wanted me to answer that one.
Oh, did she? Okay. Well, let's
tweeted about it.
Let's not give you that one then. Let's give you another one, Ross. Let's give you Simon Collins, who's another regular on our show. He wants to ask about Thomas Tuchel, or Tuchel. Do you believe the hype, and can we drive him to Arsenal, please, for next season? Simon is an Arsenal fan, as indeed most of us are on this pod. You touched on Tuchel earlier on. Do you believe the hype, and do you believe what he's doing at Dortmund can be successful?
Yeah, absolutely. I do believe the hype. Yeah, I mean, I've obviously watched him at Mainz, and the success that he had at Mainz was phenomenal. I mean, he got them into Europe, and that was a massive achievement for a club like Mainz. Stabilised them in the top half of the league. Had them playing various different styles, formations. He dealt with players leaving, brought through a lot of young players. I mean, Mainz eventually had one of the best rated academies in Germany in terms of bringing through young players. So I really do believe the hype. He is very perceptive. I remember watching a lecture on YouTube. I think it probably is on YouTube still, actually, about him talking about psychology. In terms of the psychology of players, and he makes reference to Michael Jordan's famous quote about making so many mistakes and keep going and all that kind of thing. And that's the kind of attitude that he tries to create. I think tactically a very good coach, but I think he knows how to develop players. He knows that players have to learn. He knows about personal development, and I think you look at what he did at Dortmund last year, the impact that he made, the transition from Klopp's high pressing to a more sophisticated style of pressing with even better positional play. That wasn't easy at all, and to make the progress that he did in the first season was absolutely phenomenal. You look at improvement in someone like Mkhitaryan, for example. That wasn't just a player who was, playing well under a certain coach. This was Tuchel obviously taking him under his wing and giving him the confidence and understanding his character. And yeah, I really do believe the hype. And I think if there's a guy who could take Dortmund to the next level being German champions again and possibly being European champions, then I think certainly Thomas Tuchel is the guy who could do that.
Interesting. Good answer. And go on, Drew. What did Kat want to ask?
She wanted to know. It was a question about Royce and Götze. You'd have to just refresh what the actual question was, but I think that's the one she wanted.
I can read it out for you if you like.
That's what I'm driving at.
Yep. No worries. So reunited, Götze and Royce. Will it make a difference in the table?
It all depends. I don't know. In my opinion, and I've had a lot of discussion with other people about this, but everyone's opinion about Götze isn't as high as it once was. I think the question is, can he not only really get back to his level of fitness that he had in his first stint at Dortmund, but can he sort of recapture how influential he was? And I think that's going to be the question for me. I wasn't entirely impressed with him at the Euros. Granted that he was being used in roles that I don't think he suited, but I don't know. For me, there's other attacking players that Tuchel has at his disposal I think would fit better. The problem is that because Mkhitaryan's left, now Dortmund don't have that advanced player from a wide area or even just behind the striker that is creative. Kagawa usually, sometimes he did slide in at 10 or he slotted at the top of the midfield triangle. But even with that, just the Mkhitaryan was still on the right and he would still provide a bunch of secondary creativity that, away from Kagawa and even Gundogan. So now that they've lost Mkhitaryan and Gundogan, I think that's why maybe someone like Götze was brought in, because they need that extra source of creativity and take the pressure off of Kagawa in that role. The problem is I don't know if he necessarily fits the system anymore. So for me, I would rather Dortmund, I still like the fact that they can now be more flexible tactically. They don't just have to counter, they can also possess and build up as well. And Weigl will play a key role in that. But I think the problem now is that I still think they're really effective being direct. With the way that Dembele plays on the flanks, the way that Aubameyang, he's also direct, but he's also very interchangeable up front, especially with Royce, and also with Dembele. If you use those three and an attacking three and have constant interchangeability going forward, switching the lanes between three, making diagonal runs, I think that's more effective than playing Götze there. I think, even if so I don't really know. I don't know if Götze is going to be the one to sort of, I don't know. I think he's not. I don't know if he's just going to come in and be the one that we remember from his first stint. So I'm not quite sure if that's going to make that much of a difference. I think other players on Dortmund's team now are going to have a bigger impact than he will. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, gone under the radar. Do you want to chime in on that, Ross? What your thoughts are on the Götze return?
Yeah, I mean, I'm to be honest, I'm not really too sure what to think about it because I don't know if there's a lot of evidence from his time at Bayern that he's developed. Actually, maybe there's evidence that he hasn't developed in terms of his performances. I think when he did play, even against weaker Bundesliga sides, there's a lot of energy, a lot of effort, but decision making sometimes a little bit poor. I mean, the thing is, when he played under Jurgen Klopp, he was obviously a great player, but he was part of a very effective system. He was part of a team that pressed really high, and Götze was great on the counter-attack, really good on the transition into forward areas, and that's not really the style that Dortmund are playing right now. I mean, they're trying to kind of, conjure up situations through positional play, through combinations, and I think the Götze transfer could go either way. He could be great, or he could be not so great. I think, though, with Gundogan leaving and Mkhitaryan leaving, I think it places a lot more emphasis on someone like Gonzalo Castro, who I think had a really good impact last season when he played. I really hope that he gets the chance to play every week because I'm a big fan of his. I think he was great at Leverkusen. And I think Dortmund really made a good bit of business to get him there. And, he's a very good player. I'm pretty astounded that he wasn't part of the German national team at the European Championships. Due to obviously his relationship with Jogi Löw, but I think if there's a solution maybe to the Gundogan issue, then it would probably be Castro. Götze, I'm still not sold on right now.
No, I'm with you. I love Gonzalo Castro. I think he's a really, really good little player and very under the radar. I think really enjoyed watching him for both Leverkusen and for Dortmund. So good signing that. Now, just a couple more. Reese Wicks, he wanted to know, his question's a bit long, so I'm going to shorten it. So I'm just going to ask you part of his question where he said, most passionate fans, hottest prospect, that was what I definitely wanted to ask you. And he said top 5 derbies. I'm just going to go with your favourite German derby. So there's 3 questions for you from Reese.
So favourite derby. One to keep an eye out on this season would be Hanover against Eintracht Braunschweig in the second division. This derby goes all the way back to the 16th century or something like that when Brunswick was quite an important part of the German Empire. I'm not going to give you a historical lesson on it. I really don't know. But that's a really big derby, and the cities hate each other. So yeah, I would have to say I think that's probably my top derby. Hottest prospect? That's a tough question. I'm not really too sure. I mean, you mentioned Eggestein earlier from Werder Bremen. There's a lot of hype in the German media about this kid. He signed a professional contract. Bayern Munich were interested in him, so very interested to see what he does. To be honest, I'd probably actually put Pulisic in there. I'm really impressed with Pulisic. I think he did really well last season, and if he gets the game time this year, I think he could really impress under Thomas Tuchel. And the first question was the most passionate fans.
Yes.
That's a difficult one. A really difficult one to answer. I've always found Frankfurt fans to be very passionate, sometimes a little bit aggressive as well. If you look at their relationship with Darmstadt last season, they were banned from the game against Darmstadt away from home, which is a local derby. So I'd probably have to. I mean, obviously Dortmund have the biggest attendance. They have certainly, I think, the Yellow Wall is a phenomenal sight, but I think Frankfurt fans are very passionate and sometimes a little bit too aggressive.
Yeah, that's very well summed up, actually. That game was absolutely balmy, wasn't it? I think the only incident that topped that was the famous walking off the pitch referee. That was just bizarre, that one.
I was actually at that game, and I tell you, that's the most bizarre game I've ever been to.
It really was. I remember watching it on ESPN over in the UK, and just no one knew what was going on. It was just completely blackout, really, really bizarre. But yes, nevertheless. And of course, my team that I'm following, we won't be mentioning because they are terrible. All right, we will mention them, Paderborn. So yeah, less said about them the better this season because they are floundering. I think they lost again tonight. So started the season as they mean to go on. Oh dear. Final question comes from Korosh. He's a very close friend of the show. He wants to know, with more Barclays Premier League clubs switching to a 3-man defence this season, do you see this happening in the Bundesliga as well?
I think it's definitely possible. I mean, it was interesting during the Euros that Jogi Löw reacted to Conte's tactics by playing a back three as well. And I mean, football tactics tend to go in cycles anyway, so it wouldn't surprise me if that kind of stage at the European Championships has a natural influence on some of the coaches. But it's more interesting in how they implement it. I mean, you have various extremes. You have someone like Jorge Sampaoli at Sevilla who plays very extreme three at the back, but it's more focused on build-up play. It's more to bypass high-pressing teams, and in Germany you have a lot of high-pressing teams, so a back three might actually be a good thing. I mean, we've seen teams try it in pre-season. For example, Wolfsburg tried it with Bruma, Robin Knoche, and I forgot the other third centre-half who was in that team. Werder Bremen have tried it sometimes. I think Gladbach would be the one to keep an eye on because Gladbach implemented that very well last season. The game that comes to mind was against Bayern Munich when they beat them 3-1, and the back three really worked. Not a lot of physicality in their defence, but in terms of fluidity, in terms of outnumbering the opposition's attack, I think Gladbach were really successful with it. So yeah, they're definitely worth keeping an eye on. I think with a back three.
Yeah. So it will be interesting to see how many teams change their styles and shapes of play because it was 4-4-2, then it went 4-5-1, then the 4-2-3-1. It seems to be evolving again, so we'll keep a close eye. Drew, before I get Ross's predictions, because we have to do that on the show, of course, anything final from you that you wanted to ask?
Honestly, I don't know. Apart from, do you think RB Leipzig will stay up, or do you think they'll get relegated? Because if you look at that side, and then when you look at the sort of business they've done, they've primed themselves to be a very potentially potent attacking team. But do you think that they'll be able to withstand the level of attacking quality around the Bundesliga from a defensive standpoint? Do you think they'll be able to survive, or do you think they'll drop down?
Yeah, I think they will survive. I think they could be a kind of late challenger for a European place. Certainly, like you mentioned, in attacking positions, they've got a lot of quality. Davy Selke, for example. Emil Forsberg is one I would point out. Swedish young player, I think is really impressive. They've got Keita in midfield, who's a good player, and they've got Sabitzer as well. So they've got a lot of quality. I mean, I'm not too sure defensively. Klosterman is a very good defender. He's with the German Olympic team right now. But I think actually they will have enough quality. Hasenhüttl as well is a guy who obviously proven last year with Ingolstadt that he can get a team with a very solid defensive structure. So I think for me, they'd probably be top half.
Yeah. Be very interesting to see how they get on because, as you say, it is a club that's been sort of, controversially put together, shall we say, but it's always interesting to follow new wave clubs. It's almost like Man City when they got all that money, wasn't it? Just sitting back and watching what happens. So we shall see. Right, Ross, so we come to the period of the show then. Before we let you go, we have to, of course, get your thoughts on the season ahead. So I'd like to know I can probably imagine your top two, but we'll check in just in case, and also who you might think maybe into the Champions League spots, and of course who you think will struggle.
So I think Bayern Munich will win the league again, unfortunately.
Shocker.
Leverkusen probably for second, Dortmund third, and fourth, probably Mönchengladbach, I think, will just edge Schalke out of it. Which doesn't sound very exciting because obviously this has been the top four for the last few years. In terms of maybe a dark horse, potentially, I could see Mainz doing quite well again. I think Martin Schmidt is a very good coach. Could get them doing really well again. Teams to struggle, Darmstadt, Augsburg, and difficult one. Darmstadt, Augsburg, and probably Ingolstadt.
Interesting. And just, this is purely for my own morbid curiosity, have you got a favourite kit? Past or present?
Oh, that's a good question. Do you know, I actually really like the St. Pauli kit this season. I think it's really good. I mean, I'm a big fan of Under Armour kits, and their brown kit is very, very good, I think. I'm already thinking about buying it, so it's very good kit.
It is quite bizarre, isn't it? I must admit, I do like Dortmund. So I know, Drew, you're not a huge fan, are you? But I quite like the new...
It grew on me, actually. The more I saw it pre-season, the more I actually like it.
Especially on pitch. And And you'll be happy to know, Ross, I run a Sunday League club here in the UK, and we have the kit that Freiburg wore last season. next season.
Very
The
nice.
red and black checks. So keeping it Bundesliga over here in the UK as well. Right, okay. Well, that all draws to an end of this preview then. Ross, I just want to give you an opportunity to plug anything that you'd like. Obviously, let people know where they can follow you, and anything you want to touch on, projects that you've got coming up, or anything at all you want to plug. You can tell us about your goldfish if you like. It's your platform to fire away. So go for gold.
I wouldn't bore you with my goldfish stories, unfortunately. My Twitter account is at Ross Dunbar 93. You can follow me on there. The new project that we're starting this season is called the Tribune Podcast. We're working on that. It's on Facebook and it's actually on Snapchat as well. We're up with the times. We're even on Snapchat. So that's something to keep an eye on. We'll be doing a lot of Facebook stuff. Hopefully a lot of stuff involving the clubs as well. So those are some things to keep an eye on.
Fantastic. And will that podcast be on iTunes as well, or is it just going to be a Facebook only and Snapchat only thing?
It should be on iTunes, yeah.
Superb. That's one for me to subscribe to. I listen to, on average, about 40 podcasts a week. So I need something to replace Talking for Sports. So do you know what the rest of the crew are going to be doing with are they going to be doing anything separately? Or obviously Archie is quite a big name in the journalist world over here with BT Sport. Are any of the other guys going to be doing anything, do you know?
I'm not sure. I mean, a lot of the guys are involved with the Bundesliga.com website, so go on there. English website's very, very good quality. And some of the guys are involved in the Tribune podcast as well, so that's something as well that hopefully we'll pick up before the start of the new season.
Fantastic. Yeah, it is a very, very good English website, the Bundesliga site as well. Yeah, must admit, do check that out. Super. Okay. Well, my thanks to you, Ross. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. And we say this to all our guests, but we genuinely mean it. We'll have you back anytime you like. So we've mixed with some fantastic people, and you are certainly on that list. So thank you ever so much for your time this evening.
No problem. Thanks for asking me to come on.
No problem at all. And Drew, thank you to you, sir. We will be back, of course, with our regular pod next week. So we will no doubt speak again soon.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. And thank you, Ross, for coming, for sure.
Yep, no problem.
And thank you all for listening. That has been the Bundesliga preview show for the Football Hipsters podcast. As usual, you can follow us at the FH Podcast on Twitter. We do have a Facebook page, which we're going to try and do a little bit more of this season. But time is pressing, so we'll try and get onto that. And, of course, subscribe to us on YouTube and on iTunes. You can even go back and listen to all of our daily Euro podcasts if you get really bored and just hear how bad my predictions were pre-tournament. So I do give that a look. And of course you can have a look at our website, which is also the Football Hipsters podcast.co.uk. So thanks as always for listening. Thank you again to Ross and Drew. We've been the Football Hipsters. We will return very soon.